I work overnights as a gas station clerk in our small town. Our station is located off the highway that leads out of town, so most of the cars and trucks that come by are on long drives across the state. This makes my night shifts unpredictable. Sometimes there are a lot of cars and trucks coming through, but other times it's mostly empty. This particular night was on the slower side, but still had some cars stopping by every once in a while. Thankfully, to keep me busy, my boss had left me a bunch of tasks to complete during my shift. One of those tasks was to reset a shelf, which meant taking everything off, repositioning the racks, and placing everything back. It's not hard or complicated, just time-consuming. About an hour into the night, I heard some thunder in the distance. Checking the forecast, it said a storm was coming soon, so I paused what I was doing and quickly went outside to take care of the trash bins, so I wouldn't have to do it later while it was raining. While I was out there, I saw a car's headlights in the dark about a quarter-mile down the road. They were parked, but there was nothing out there other than large empty fields. It could have been nothing or maybe a flat tire, but I went on with my work and got back inside. Not too long after, it started pouring outside. I continued working on the shelves, but as the storm got worse, I had to lock the entrance doors because the wind kept swinging them open. Nobody had come into the store all night anyway, and now with the storm, there were barely any cars out. While I locked up, I noticed that the headlights were still out by the field and hadn't moved. This kept my mind occupied for a little while as I worked, but then through the rain, I heard the door shake louder than usual. I turned around and saw a guy with his face right up to the door, staring right at me. He looked to be in his early 40s, wearing a hood over his head and looking very tired. I unlocked the door and opened it for him, making a comment about the bad weather, but he ignored me. The guy just stood there, looking at me as water dripped from his face, then walked past me and started walking through the aisles like a normal shopper. Really confused by his behavior, I went around the counter and waited for him to be done shopping. He walked around for a few minutes, glancing over at me a couple of times before walking out the door. I don't think he stole anything, he just walked around and then left. Considering the weather, it was really unusual and almost creepy. I wondered why he even bothered coming inside. I looked out the window and saw the man walking past the gas pumps and out to the road. Then he stopped on the corner. A moment later, the headlights down the road started moving, coming toward the gas station and stopping right next to the guy. While I watched, the front doors started swinging open again, reminding me to go over and lock them. I then watched from the door as the guy started walking back toward the gas station and the car followed, driving into the parking lot. They parked by the front, and another man got out of the car. Then both of them came walking up to the door. The first man pushed on it as if expecting it to still be unlocked, but instantly got angry when it didn't open. I was only a couple of feet from the door, but he still banged aggressively on it while looking right at me. This was far beyond what any normal customer would do, so at this point, I knew there was more to this. I ran to the desk and triggered the alarm to notify the police station, then just watched as they both tried kicking the door down for a minute before getting in the car and speeding away. Afterward, in those minutes before the police showed up, it was just so unreal how everything felt with only the sound of the storm outside. There was no doubt about what was about to happen, but it doesn't make it any less terrifying. If it wasn't storming that night and the wind wasn't blowing the doors open, I probably never would have even locked them, meaning they could have just walked in, and there would have been nothing I could do. Maybe it would have been just a regular robbery, but there's no denying that it probably would have been easiest for them to just take me down and then rob the place. Unfortunately, they were never caught, so I still find myself getting nervous on every overnight shift. I live in a small 4-story apartment complex. I used to have a roommate, but they moved out a few months before this, and I decided it would be easier for me to just stay at the apartment rather than find a new place. The other people living in the building were mostly older couples, but I'd never really met any of them. We all kept to ourselves, which I actually liked. Anyway, I was getting home from work late one night, entering the complex around 11 p.m. It was quiet as I walked up the stairs to my room, but when I rounded the corner into the hallway, a man was standing at my door. He immediately noticed me, and before I even had the chance to react, he started apologizing and saying he'd mixed up the doors. He then turned around and went into the apartment right across from mine. I'd never met him before or even seen him, but seeing that he lived in the unit across from me, I figured maybe he did actually mix up the doors, especially if he just moved in. It was still really weird, though. I didn't know why he would just be standing outside of the door, if he did think it was his, or why when he saw me he suddenly knew that he was at the wrong door. Whatever the case, I went inside and locked the door behind me, not sure what to make of the scenario. It was so late, and I was really tired, so maybe I should have been more worried than I was, but I just didn't have the energy to think about it. I made a quick meal, then sat on the couch for a bit and watched some TV. About 30 minutes went by until I heard something outside my door. It was just a quiet shuffling sound, but it sounded almost like it was up against the door. I got up and went over, listening for a second before opening it. No one was there. I then stepped into the hallway and looked down, not seeing anyone but hearing footsteps going down the stairs. I went back in and closed the door. Maybe I was overthinking it now, but I started thinking that the man could have leaned against my door to listen in on my apartment. It would explain the shuffling sound I heard and how they knew to leave as soon as I started walking up. Again, I could have just been imagining the worst-case scenario, but I was definitely more shaken for the rest of the night. I didn't get in bed until 1 a.m., but I fell asleep soon after. Nothing else that I know of happened that night or in the morning. I went to work and again got back to the apartment around 11 o'clock. Walking in, I was a bit more cautious than the night before. I walked up the stairs and looked down the hallway, but no one was at the door. Still, for some reason, I got a strange feeling seeing the hallway empty, and I didn't know why. I quickly went inside and locked the door behind me, only to turn around and be face to face with the man from last night. He was standing in the doorway to my bedroom and immediately started telling me to be quiet and do as he says, trying to direct me into the living room. I took my chances, turning back around and trying to get the door open, but the man grabbed my arm and started to pull me back. Just when I got it open, I yelled as loud as I could as he tried covering my mouth, but being unsuccessful, he let me go. As I ran down the stairs, I heard him leaving as well. I went straight to my car, driving away and calling the police. When they got there, the man was gone, of course. I told them that he lived in the room across from mine, but it turned out to be a vacant unit. The man, whoever he was, didn't even live in the building. I don't know how he got into the building or into both mine and the vacant room, but clearly, he had access that he shouldn't have. What he wanted to do by breaking into my apartment and waiting for me is something I hope to never find out firsthand. With him still being out there, though, all I can do is pray he wasn't targeting me in particular. This happened a few months ago. I'm 32 and live in a small house alone. It was one of my days off work, so I was at home trying to relax and enjoy the day. It was about 4 p.m., and I had just started cooking dinner when a knock came from the front door. I put everything down and went up to the front. There was a man standing on my porch, and behind him was a small gray van parked on the curb. I opened the door. "How can I help you?" The man had a delayed reaction, but then said he was doing free home inspections in the neighborhood and wanted to offer me a free inspection for my house. The whole time he was speaking, though, it wasn't even like a typical salesperson. He said it all in a monotone voice and with just a blank expression. Even if he was normal, though, it seemed kind of sketchy, so I said I was okay and closed the door. I went back to the kitchen and started working on my food again, but I could tell the man wasn't leaving. Another couple of minutes went by, and I was finally able to see the man walking back to his van. Instead of getting in, though, he walked to the side and opened the sliding door. A man from inside the van got out and started walking up to the door while the first man stayed by the van. I immediately got nervous, wondering what the second man wanted and why the first man didn't even leave. When he knocked, I made sure to tell him I was fine and not interested without opening the door. As soon as I did, he started trying to force the door open. I started pushing back and screaming for him to leave, but he barely seemed to react. When I realized he wasn't letting up, I stepped back and let the door swing open, planning to then immediately slam it back shut and lock it. It worked, but not before he swung the door back, and the lock caught on his arm, cutting him. He then screamed in pain and ran back to the van. I called the police while watching out the window as the first man jumped in the van and they drove away. They were never found. Every day since, I think about what those men would have done if they had gotten in.